For weeks, you've been sold a story, a fairy tale. The idea that a secret loophole could bring Caitlin Clark back for a dramatic last-minute return to the WNBA Finals. It was the perfect narrative, the injured hero, the underdog team, the one last ride, but it was all a lie. The devastating truth is, Caitlin Clark was never eligible. Her season wasn't ended by an injury, it was ended by a sentence, handed down by the WNBA's own rulebook. She wasn't just ruled out. She was banned. Today, we're filtering out the noise and exposing the real story. This isn't about a miraculous comeback. It's about a colossal failure of league management. We're going to connect the dots and show you the draconian rule they used to sideline their biggest star, break down how this single decision amounts to the greatest act of financial self-sabotage in modern sports, and reveal how the league itself is the true villain in this story. We are a community of narrative analysts here, and this is the kind of deep dive investigation we live for. If you believe the truth matters more than the clicks, do me a solid and hit that like button. It's a massive signal that you want us to keep digging. All right, let's get into the anatomy of this deception. The story that captivated the internet was built on a foundation of hope. It claimed that under a specific clause in the collective bargaining agreement, the Indiana Fever could activate an inactive player if a roster spot opened up due to another injury. Fans and content creators pointed to the Fever's mysteriously short 11-player playoff roster as the ultimate clue, a strategic move to keep the door cracked open for Clark's return. Videos went viral showing Clark taking jump shots in practice, and the hashtag #LetHerCook exploded every time. The narrative was simple. If the underdog Fever could just make the finals, their hero was waiting in the wings. But as we, the narrative analysts, know, the most compelling stories are often the least true. The entire premise was flawed from the start. That CBA clause everyone was talking about. It's real, but it was irrelevant. The rule only applies to players who are already on the submitted show active playoff roster. And here is the fact that dismantles the entire fantasy. Caitlin Clark was never on the Fever's active playoff roster to begin with. When the regular season ended, the team made the official decision to leave her off. Once that deadline passed, her fate was sealed. There is no loophole. There is no pathway back. According to the league's own hard and fast rules, she is, and always was, completely ineligible to play in the 2025 postseason, regardless of her health. Her official statement on September 4th confirmed it. Disappointed isn't a big enough word to describe how I am feeling, as she announced she would not be returning. The viral narrative wasn't just speculation, it was misinformation. It sold fans a dream while ignoring the procedural nightmare that made it impossible. And this brings us to the real weapon in this story. The instrument the WNBA used to ban its own superstar from its biggest stage. It's not a conspiracy, it's just the rules. The rule in question is the WNBA's hard roster lock for the playoffs. In theory, its purpose is simple: to ensure competitive integrity. It prevents teams from parachuting in healthy players at the last minute to gain an unfair advantage, solidifying the rosters that got you through the regular season. On paper, it's a rule born from a traditionalist's view of sportsmanship. But in 2025, in the face of a transcendent economic force like Caitlin Clark, that tradition becomes a trap. It's a draconian, one-size-fits-all policy that completely fails to account for the unique reality of the modern, star-powered league the WNBA is trying to become. This isn't a case of a team trying to sign a free agent off the street. This is about the league's single biggest asset, a player already under contract, a player whose health was trending in the right direction, being blocked by inflexible bureaucracy. The rule doesn't have a common-sense Caitlin Clark clause. It has no emergency valve for a generational talent. And by refusing to even consider an exception, the WNBA made a choice. They chose procedure over progress, and in doing so, they committed an unforgivable act of financial self-sabotage. Let's connect the dots on what eat exactly as the league threw away. Before her injury, Caitlin Clark almost single-handedly rewrote the WNBA's economic future in just 13 games. Her debut season transformed the Indiana Fever from an afterthought into the league's must-watch team. We're talking about record-breaking television ratings, sold-out arenas across the country, and a surge in social media engagement that led all of professional sports. She is the business, and the business was booming. Then she gets injured, and her team does the impossible. They went on one of the most resilient and unexpected postseason runs in recent memory, defeating higher-seeded teams and forcing a winner-take-all Game 5 against the defending champion Las Vegas Aces in the semifinals. They became the ultimate underdog story. You have your miracle team in the finals, and your transcendent superstar is potentially healthy enough to play. A finals with Caitlin Clark's return isn't just a big sports story. It's a cultural event. It's a headline that dominates ESPN, Good Morning America, and The Today Show. It brings in millions of casual viewers who have never watched a WNBA game before. It's the kind of lightning-in-a-bottle moment that marketing departments dream of, a moment that could have cemented the WNBA's arrival as a mainstream sports powerhouse. And the league, faced with this golden opportunity, looked at their own rule book and decided no. They chose to uphold a rigid policy, effectively banning their main character from her own story's climax. They chose an empty seat on the bench over millions of eyeballs on the screen. So let me ask you this. Does a rule that forces a league to actively work against its own financial interests make any sense at all? Let me know your take in the comments. This decision is so baffling from a business perspective that it forces us, as narrative analysts, to ask the next logical question. Why? Why would the WNBA's leadership willingly leave their biggest weapon in the armory during their most important battle? This is where we have to filter through the noise of online speculation, because many of you watching were asking this exact question in real time. Okay, now we're officially in rumor territory, but it's critical to understanding the story. The social media buzz was deafening, with fans theorizing that the league office could step in. The prevailing theory was that Commissioner Kathy Engelbert could grant an emergency exception for the good of the game, bending the rules to capitalize on a once-in-a-generation moment. But no such move ever came. The league remained silent, hiding behind the black and white text of its own bylaws. This inaction paints a picture of a league caught between two worlds. On one side, you have the new reality, an explosive, star-driven, mainstream product powered by the Caitlin Clark effect. On the other, you have the old guard, a bureaucratic system built on rigid procedures and a traditionalist mindset that fears setting a new precedent more than it desires exponential growth. The decision not to intervene wasn't just a missed opportunity, it was a statement. It signaled that the league's old habits and fear of change were more powerful than their desire to fully embrace the future that was knocking at their door. They had a choice between serving their star and serving their system, and they chose the system. And this leads us to the other lingering mystery in this whole affair, that open roster spot. We've established it was never a real pathway for Clark, so what was it? Why would the Indiana Fever intentionally enter the most critical stretch of their season short-handed, with only 11 players instead of the allowed 12? Many of you connecting these dots on Reddit and X theorized that the Fever were playing chess, keeping a spot open just in case the league came to its senses and granted an exception. It was seen as an act of defiance and hope. But if the front office knew the rules as well as we do, then that open spot looks less like a clever strategy and more like something else. Was it a massive strategic blunder? A decision that robbed them of a valuable depth piece they desperately needed during a grueling playoff run? Or, and this is a fascinating theory, was it a quiet, symbolic protest? A way for the organization to visually represent the player they were being forced to leave behind? A constant, visible reminder of the hole in their lineup, put there not by injury, but by the league's own inflexible rules. We may never know the true motive, but that empty 12th spot will forever be a part of this story, a symbol of the player who should have been there. Ultimately, when we filter out all the noise, the false hope, the viral rumors, the front office mysteries, we are left with the human cost of this bureaucratic failure. While the world was debating a fantasy, a generational competitor was fighting every single day with the singular goal of getting back on the court for her team. And when she was finally ready, the league she helped build told her it didn't matter. In her own words, disappointed isn't a big enough word to describe how I am feeling. That is the voice of a player who was robbed of her moment, not by her body, but by a bylaw. Her presence on the bench, passionately cheering for her teammates, became a tragic symbol of the entire situation, the league's greatest asset, sitting right there in plain sight, completely unable to be used. The final verdict is clear. The story of the 2025 WNBA Finals isn't about a heroic return that almost happened. It's about a monumental failure of vision that did happen. The WNBA was presented with a transcendent star, a resilient underdog team, and a storyline that could have captivated the entire sports world. And instead of seizing that moment, they let an outdated, inflexible rule sabotage their own product. This wasn't a tragedy caused by an injury. It was a crisis caused by a lack of foresight. The league wasn't just enforcing a rule. They were exposing the fact that their system is not yet ready for the superstar they have on their hands. So what's your take on all this? We want to know who you think is most to blame for Caitlin Clark missing the finals. Is it the injury, the Fever's roster management, or the WNBA's outdated rulebook? Let us know your verdict in the comment section below. This story is a perfect example of why the story behind the story is what truly matters. If you believe in getting the full picture, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on so you never miss an investigation. And finally, if you know a fan who only heard the fairy tale version of this story, share this video with them. Every narrative analyst deserves to be in on the real conversation.